You like to believe you're in control, that your thoughts begin in your brain, that your decisions are yours, that your body listens when you tell it what to do. But biology doesn't work that way. Inside living systems, control doesn't always come from awareness. It doesn't require consciousness, and it doesn't ask permission. Across nature, and inside your own body, there are mechanisms that influence behavior, make decisions, and override instinct without ever announcing themselves. Some are subtle, some are absolute, and some have been doing it long before humans ever noticed.
In this documentary, we're not looking at monsters or science fiction. We're looking at real organisms, real systems, and real biology that takes control, sometimes quietly, sometimes completely.
Because the most unsettling truth isn't that something else might control you. It's that it already does, and you rarely feel it happening. There's a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii.
It's microscopic. It doesn't announce itself. And once it enters your body, it doesn't try to kill you. It does something far more unsettling. It changes how you behave. Toxoplasma is most commonly spread through cats. It reproduces inside feline intestines, and its eggs are shed into the environment through feces. From there, it can contaminate soil, water, food, and surfaces. When another animal, or a human, accidentally ingests those eggs, the parasite begins a quiet journey through the body. Most infections feel like nothing. No pain, no warning, no symptoms dramatic enough to raise alarms. But the parasite doesn't stay idle. After entering the bloodstream, Toxoplasma can cross one of the body's most protected barriers, the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the brain, it forms tiny cysts within neural tissue. And this is where control begins. In animals, the effect is unmistakable. Rodents infected with Toxoplasma lose their natural fear of cats. Instead of avoiding the scent of predators, they become strangely attracted to it. Their survival instincts flip. The parasite doesn't just make them careless, it makes them suicidal. And that's not an accident. For Toxoplasma to complete its life cycle, it needs to return to a cat. By altering the rodent's behavior, the parasite increases the chance that its host will be eaten. Control, in this case, is precise, evolutionary, efficient. For years, scientists assumed humans were immune to this kind of manipulation. They were wrong. Studies now suggest that people infected with Toxoplasma show subtle but measurable changes in behavior. Increased risk-taking, slower reaction times, reduced fear response, higher rates of impulsivity. In some populations, infection has even been correlated with higher incidences of car accidents. The parasite doesn't tell you what to think. It nudges how you feel. Fear becomes quieter. Risk feels less dangerous. Decisions tilt in ways you don't consciously notice. You still believe you're choosing. That's the most important part. Infected individuals don't feel controlled. They don't hear voices. They don't lose awareness. The parasite doesn't replace your personality. It leans on it, subtly reshaping emotional responses that guide behavior. And the most disturbing detail is the scale. Some estimates suggest that up to 1/3 of the global human population may carry Toxoplasma gondii. In many cases, the infection is lifelong. The cysts remain dormant in the brain, chemically active but biologically quiet. You could be infected and never know. You could make a reckless decision and fully believe it was your idea. This raises an uncomfortable question. If a microscopic organism can alter fear, risk, and impulse without announcing itself, where does control actually live? Is it in conscious thought? Or is it in chemistry, timing, and probability? Toxoplasma doesn't need intelligence. It doesn't need awareness. It doesn't need intention. It simply changes the system and lets the system behave differently. And if that sounds extreme, remember this. This is not the only organism that does it. It's just the quietest.
There are forms of control that work quietly, and then there are forms of control that don't bother hiding. In the forests of tropical regions, there exists a fungus called Ophiocordyceps. Unlike parasites that influence behavior indirectly, this organism takes a far more aggressive approach. It doesn't suggest, it commands. Ophiocordyceps infects insects, most famously ants, by releasing microscopic spores into the environment. When a spore lands on a suitable host, it penetrates the insect's body and begins to spread, but it doesn't immediately kill. Instead, it waits. The fungus grows inside the host, weaving itself through muscle tissue and internal organs while keeping the insect alive. During this phase, the host behaves almost normally. It continues to forage. It continues to move. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. Then control begins. At a specific point in the infection, the fungus overrides the insect's nervous system. The host suddenly abandons its normal behavior and begins to climb. It ascends plant stems, leaves, or branches, always to a precise height, often just a few inches above the forest floor. This location is not random. It provides the perfect temperature and humidity for what happens next. Once the insect reaches the correct position, the fungus forces it to bite down. The jaws lock. The insect cannot release its grip. Moments later, the host dies, exactly where the fungus wants it. Control is complete, but the story doesn't end with death. After the insect's body shuts down, the fungus continues to grow. It pushes a stalk through the host's head or body, breaking through the exoskeleton. Over time, this structure matures and releases a cloud of spores into the air, raining infection down onto the forest floor below. Every step of this process is optimized. The climb, the height, the timing, the release. Nothing about it is accidental. What makes this phenomenon especially unsettling is that the fungus doesn't control the brain directly. Instead, it hijacks muscle movement using chemical signals, bypassing decision-making entirely. The insect doesn't choose to climb. It is physically driven to do so. The body moves. The will is irrelevant. This isn't influence. This is biological override. Entire ecosystems contain fields of infected corpses, insects frozen in place, each one positioned perfectly to spread the next generation of spores. It's so precise that scientists refer to it as an example of extended phenotype, the parasite expressing its genes through the body of another organism. The insect becomes machinery, and the fungus doesn't stop with ants. Different species of Ophiocordyceps target different hosts, each with its own customized method of control. Evolution has fine-tuned these interactions over millions of years, refining behavior manipulation into something disturbingly efficient. There is no resistance, no awareness, no rebellion. The host is alive until the moment it isn't, and even then its body continues to serve the organism inside it. Compared to this, Toxoplasma's influence seems almost polite. At least the host still believes it is choosing. Ophiocordyceps removes that illusion entirely, and this raises a deeper problem. If control can be taken so completely, without intelligence, consciousness, or intention, then control itself may not be something a mind has. It may simply be something biology does, and once you accept that, the next question becomes unavoidable. What happens when control doesn't come from an invader at all, but from the system itself? If control can be taken from a body, the next question is whether it needs to come from anywhere at all. There exists an organism that has no brain, no nervous system, no consciousness. And yet it solves problems. It's called slime mold. At first glance, slime mold doesn't look like much. It's a soft, amorphous mass that creeps slowly across surfaces in damp environments. It doesn't have organs. It doesn't have tissues in the way animals do. And it certainly doesn't have a central command center. By every definition we normally use, it shouldn't be capable of intelligent behavior. But it is. In laboratory experiments, scientists placed slime mold inside complex mazes. Food sources were positioned at multiple endpoints. The slime mold began by spreading itself out in all directions, exploring every possible path at once. Then something unexpected happened. Over time, the slime mold retracted its body from inefficient routes and reinforced the most efficient ones. Eventually, it formed a single optimized path between food sources, effectively solving the maze. No brain, no planning, no awareness, just behavior that looks disturbingly like problem solving. In other experiments, slime mold was able to recreate transportation networks that closely resembled human-designed systems. When researchers mapped food sources to represent major cities, the slime mold connected them, using routes nearly identical to real-world rail networks, minimizing distance, maximizing efficiency, and reducing redundancy. It didn't learn this from experience. It wasn't trained. It wasn't programmed. The behavior emerged naturally from the organism's structure. Even more unsettling, slime mold can remember. When exposed to unfavorable conditions like salt or dryness, it initially avoids certain areas. If those conditions are later removed, the slime mold continues to behave as if the threat still exists, even though it has no neurons to store memory. Somehow, information persists within the organism itself, not as thoughts, not as memories, but as patterns. Control here doesn't come from invasion. It doesn't come from manipulation. It emerges. The slime mold isn't being directed by anything. There is no parasite pulling strings, no fungus issuing commands. The system organizes itself through simple rules: chemical gradients, physical constraints, and feedback loops. Yet the result looks intentional. This forces a redefinition of what control actually is. If an organism can navigate space, optimize decisions, and remember past conditions without a brain, then control may not require a controller. It may be a property of living systems themselves. At this point, the idea of a single command center, one brain, one mind, one source of authority, begins to fall apart. Because if intelligence can exist without a brain, then perhaps having a brain doesn't mean control is centralized either. And that brings us to a different kind of organism, one that does have brains, plural. We tend to think of intelligence as something centralized, one brain, one command center, one place where decisions are made. But some organisms never evolved that way. The leech is one of them. A leech doesn't have a single brain controlling its body. Instead, it has 32. Each segment of its body contains its own mini-brain, a cluster of neurons capable of sensing, processing information, and issuing commands locally. There is no headquarters. Movement, feeding, and coordination emerge from cooperation between these independent neural units. Each segment responds to its immediate environment while staying loosely synchronized with the rest of the body. Cut off one part of a leech, and it doesn't immediately stop functioning. The remaining segments continue to move, react, and adapt. Control isn't lost, it's redistributed. This system didn't evolve by accident. For a soft-bodied organism that stretches, contracts, and moves in complex ways, centralized control would be slow and inefficient. Distributed intelligence allows faster responses, redundancy, and resilience. If one section fails, the rest compensate. From a survival standpoint, it works perfectly, but conceptually, it's disturbing, because it means control doesn't require unity. There is no single place inside the leech where decisions happen. Instead, decisions emerge from interaction, from local rules applied across the body. No segment knows the whole picture, yet the organism behaves as one. This challenges one of our most basic assumptions about minds. If an organism with 32 brains can move with purpose, respond to threats, and survive efficiently, then having one brain doesn't guarantee singular control. It only guarantees coordination. The leech doesn't think in the way humans do, but it doesn't need to. Its intelligence is structural rather than reflective. Control exists not as a thought, but as a pattern of responses unfolding across the body. This kind of system raises an uncomfortable possibility. If control can be distributed across multiple neural centers in a leech, and if intelligence can emerge without a brain in slime mold, then the idea that humans operate under a single, unified command becomes harder to defend. Because human bodies aren't as centralized as we like to believe. There are systems inside you that sense, decide, and act independently of conscious thought. Networks that respond faster than awareness. Circuits that regulate rhythm, pressure, and emotion without waiting for permission. And one of those systems lives somewhere you probably don't expect. It's not in your head, it's in your chest. We are taught from an early age that control lives in the brain, that the brain thinks, the brain decides, the brain commands the body. Everything else is support. But the human body never fully agreed to that arrangement. Inside your chest, your heart contains its own network of approximately 40,000 specialized neurons. This network is often referred to as the heart brain. It doesn't think in words, it doesn't reason, but it senses, processes, and responds independently. And it does not wait for instructions. The heart regulates rhythm, blood flow, and pressure automatically. But it also sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends back. Signals travel upward through neural pathways influencing emotional processing, attention, and stress responses. In other words, information doesn't just flow downward. It flows both ways. This system is so autonomous that under certain medical conditions, the heart can continue functioning even when disconnected from the brain. In rare surgical and experimental cases, hearts have continued to beat outside the body for short periods of time, responding to chemical signals, adjusting rhythm, maintaining function. No thoughts, no consciousness, no oversight, just biological control. This isn't symbolic, it's mechanical. Your emotional state can shift based on heart rhythm alone. Irregular patterns can trigger anxiety. Coherent rhythms can produce calm. Long before you are aware of fear or stress, your heart has already responded and informed your brain afterward. You don't decide how fast your heart beats in a crisis. Your body decides first. This creates an unsettling inversion, We like to think emotion follows thought. In reality, thought often follows physiology. The heart senses change, the body reacts. The brain explains it later. When viewed alongside everything that came before, parasites altering behavior, fungi hijacking movement, intelligence emerging without brains, and control distributed across multiple neural centers, the heart-brain becomes impossible to ignore. It's not a metaphor, it's a reminder. You are not a single unified command system. You are a collection of semi-autonomous processes working together, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict, all trying to keep you alive. Control emerges from interaction, not authority. The brain plays a role, but it does not rule alone. And that realization reframes everything. Because if control can exist without awareness, if decisions can be made before you feel them, and if parts of your body act independently of thought, then consciousness may not be the driver you believe it is. It may simply be the narrator, describing actions that have already begun. And if that's true, then the most unsettling idea isn't that something else might control you. It's that control was never singular to begin with. It was always shared. We like to believe control belongs to consciousness, that awareness equals authority, that if we understand something, we command it. But biology doesn't work that way. Control can exist without thought, without intention, without a single mind in charge. It moves through systems, chemistry, and timing, shaping behavior long before you notice. You are not one voice giving orders. You are a network, negotiating survival in real time. And the most unsettling part isn't that something else might control you. It's that control was never centralized to begin with.